Wonderful. Welcome to Explore Gospel Justice. I'm Emily O'Donnell. I serve as the VP of Engagement at Administer Justice, which is a organization that partners with churches to help them do legal aid ministry. And I first learned about Administer Justice through my home church. My husband was the pastor there. We were involved in different organizations, different service opportunities, food pantries, homeless shelter, things like that in our community, but we had never considered how frequently legal issues were at the root of poverty until Bruce Strom, who is the founder of Administer Justice, came and spoke at our church. And that was really eye-opening, and we immediately thought, this is something we need to get involved in. So we were in the process of getting involved, learning more, just like you are today, on the Saturday in March of 2020 that the world shut down. So it took us a little bit longer to get started, but now there's a thriving Gospel Justice Center at our church there. And I then joined the team of Administer Justice about 6 months later, and that's been such a privilege to get to partner with churches all across our country who are looking for ways that they can make an impact in their community. So I'm excited to share more about our model so you can discern if it's a right fit for you or for your church. And so I'm going to start with, why is legal aid needed? Why do we think churches are the ideal place to provide it? How our model works, and then what some next steps would be if you're interested in learning more. My colleague Courtney is keeping an eye on the chat, so if you have questions as we're going along, you can drop them in there, and she'll do her best to answer those. And then I'm also going to be sending an email out with a link to the recording of this webinar that you can share, and there'll be a link to my calendar. So if you've got questions after the fact, you can follow up. We're going to try and keep it to 30 minutes. So we're going to get started. One of the things I love about Administer Justice is our logo. And if you look closely at that, you'll notice that the base of the torch is formed by 3 hands, not one, like Lady Liberty. And that's because we believe no one should face injustice alone, and no one does justice alone. So those hands are different sizes, they're different colors deliberately, because we believe it takes a diverse team in order to achieve our mission. So if you visited one of our centers, you would of course see an attorney, but you might also see a farmer or a retired school teacher or a college student, all bringing their unique gifts in order to run that center. And that's beautiful. I love that everyone can take their unique gifts and do something that we know is at the heart of our God, which is seeking justice for the vulnerable. Another thing I love about our model is how it got started. So our founder, Bruce Strom, who you see pictured here, was a very successful trial lawyer in the Chicagoland area, had multiple law offices, had argued cases all the way to the US Supreme Court. But his wife, Helen, who is a Puerto Rican from the Bronx of New York, was praying that God would open his eyes to the needs of the vulnerable. And she gave him a very special Christmas present as she was praying for him. She hand wrote out 365 verses from justice from God's word, and gave it to him so that every day he would read and be reminded of what God has to say about justice. So you can see one of the cards here that she wrote out. And so as she was praying and God's word was working on Bruce's heart, he did sell his law practice and began practicing just out of his church, providing free legal aid to the neighbors in his community. That was in the year 2000. Fast forward 26 years, Bruce has developed a model so that other churches are able to do the very same thing that he's doing, provide legal aid through volunteer teams, through volunteer attorneys. And part of that came about because another man, who you can see pictured here holding the Bible, John Robb, prayed with Bruce for a year. John Robb had gone before Congress. He had testified on the need for legal aids and was instrumental in getting those started across the country. He came to faith later in life, and as he and Bruce prayed about what would it look like for the church to get involved in legal aid, God gave them this vision of 1,000 gospel justice centers across our country that are transforming lives in the name of Christ. And that is still our vision. We are at, I think, 114 centers right now in 22 states. So we still have a ways to go, but we're making a significant difference, and we're inviting you to consider getting a part of that. So let's start with, why do we need to provide legal aid? Sometimes people think, well, everyone has the right to an attorney because they've either heard that in a movie or it's something they have in their head. Well, that is only true if you are accused of a crime and given a public defender. If you're the victim of a crime, you might be left to fend for yourself. That's in the criminal justice system. In the civil justice system, which includes things like healthcare, housing, family law, veterans affairs, there are over 150 million new cases every year, and the majority of those are not going to require representation in court, but they do often require some level of legal knowledge or expertise. So our law has many wonderful protections for the vulnerable. I'm thankful for that. I want to advocate for more of that. But you often can't access those protections if you don't know the law. So just one example of that, veterans who were completing claim forms just to receive benefits that were owed to them, if they had the help of a lawyer in completing that form, they were 144% more successful than if they did it themselves. So really small act by an attorney, really significant impact on that veteran's life. But we all know lawyers are expensive. I'm not sure what you would guess if you're thinking about how many people in the US can't afford an attorney, but if your guess was 100 million, you would be correct. 1 out of every 3 Americans can't afford an attorney. So that's a lot of people. How many of them are actually going to have a legal issue this year? Also a lot, about 75% of them are going to have one legal issue. Many of them multiple, because they tend to cluster and go together. And the really disturbing thing is that about 37 million are going to be turned away from legal help. 37 million. It's hard to get your mind around that. So I usually ask people to picture their local sports stadium. For us, that is Soldier Field. Picture it filled to capacity with low-income individuals with a legal problem, let's say 60,000 people. Into that stadium would walk just 6 legal aid attorneys to meet the needs. So you can picture a table with 10,000 people lining up. And if they just met with them for 30 minutes to answer questions, give them some brief legal advice, it would take them 6 months if they work 24/7 without taking any breaks. So that gives you some sense of the need versus what is actually being provided. Now, the standout summary from a report that was done a couple years ago was that low-income Americans don't get the help they need for 92% of their civil legal issues, 92%. And for a majority of them, not surprisingly, that lack of help led to other problems, whether that was mental health, finances, physical health and safety, or their relationships. Now, if you step back and just say, how are we doing on the world stage? The World Justice Project every year ranks the countries of the world on many things, including affordable access to justice. So again, if you were guessing, out of the 143 countries that were ranked, where would the US fall? We aren't dead last. I'm thankful for that. We were 112th, though, which is dead last for first world countries. We were behind China, Russia, and even Iran. And we've been tracking this statistic over the last 10 years, and we've been getting worse, not better over time. So it's clear there's a problem. What difference does it actually make to provide legal help? I don't know if any of you have read this book, Invisible Child. It won the Pulitzer Prize a couple years ago, and it follows a homeless family in the city of New York, centered on the girl that you see in the picture there, Dasani. And one of our justice champions just said, you need to read this book. If this family had just gotten good legal counsel and advice at critical points in their story, their lives would have taken a radically different turn. And that is what we see with the clients who come to our centers. Thousands of clients every year. They come in scared and confused. They leave with direction and a plan with what they're going to do, and that makes all the difference. So why do we have these centers in churches? I want to just say a couple words on that. I've already talked about how Bruce was called because God's word reminded him over and over that God loves justice and he calls his people to seek justice for the vulnerable. If you're reading through the Old Testament, you'll regularly see that God judges his people for 2 things, for idolatry and for injustice, which includes failing to seek justice for the vulnerable. So that's the main reason. If God calls us people to seek justice, we should be about it. This is something we should be doing. And the way to access justice in our country is through the legal system. The second reason, though, is that the church is how God has chosen to work in this world. That's kind of Grand Central Station. And so there's no better place for people to be than when they're going through a hard, confusing, often emotional situation than a church where they're going to be welcomed by compassionate, caring individuals. And we have surveys that go out to our clients after every visit, and that's exactly what we see, that it is often the care of the church folk that matters as much as the legal help that they received. And I think that's beautiful. And then the final reason is that just churches are in every community. They're usually available on a Saturday morning when most of our centers operate, so they are perfectly positioned to provide the kind of help that is needed. Now, if you were to guess how many of the 384,000 churches in America were hosting some kind of legal ministry, what percentage would you guess? Very sadly, it's less than 0.1%. So something that we know is so important to our God and something that he calls his people to be a part of. Still, we're not doing that. Now, there's some reasons for that. Pastors are not equipped to provide legal help, but if you think about how the church got the first hospitals started and got the first universities and schools started, it's a reminder that there's an opportunity for the church to step into a new space and to begin to do something important. We often talk about how in the US, the church is increasingly viewed as apathetic to the needs of the vulnerable. And we believe this is an opportunity to change that perception and invite people to answer God's call to seek justice for the vulnerable. So what does it look like to host a center? I want to talk a little bit about that now. I mentioned it's often on a Saturday morning. Our center operates once a month. So you could picture every second Saturday, your church would open its doors. It's usually for 3 hours. So let's say from 9 to 12, it would be run by a team of volunteers from your church that we would have equipped and trained and supported. And it would be led by what we call the justice champion, the lead volunteer. That person does not need to be an attorney. In fact, at most of our centers, that person is not an attorney, but it is someone who's passionate about legal aid. And I thought it would be helpful to hear from one of our justice champions. So this is what Andy had to say.
I got involved with the Justice Center as the Justice Champion basically because of a New Year's resolution that actually stuck for the first time. So I just committed to read a book a month. And I came across the book Just Mercy by Brian Stevenson, and my heart was broken, and I just felt devastated for the legal system and what was going on. And, you know, reading these stories that had happened within the time that I had been born, and I just felt like, wow, I thought that we got past all that. I thought that we were beyond these things, beyond this injustice. You know, my eyes hadn't been open to it. And so reading that book lit a fire in me, and I thought, I gotta sell everything I own so I can afford law school. I gotta go to law school, become a lawyer. But that's not practical. And so within a month after reading that book, Administer Justice came and did a presentation at my church. I just knew I had to do something. My heartstrings had already been primed by reading the book and feeling like we needed to do something. And so I said, absolutely, I'll help, sign me up, whatever you need. And so that's how I ended up as Justice Champion. Starting the Justice Center was surprisingly easy. It was, all the training is set and ready for you to go. You just access it on the internet and it's ready for you when you're ready for it. We were very lucky to have a team that just stepped right up. You know, we had a presentation here at church, and from that presentation, just about every position got filled with people who were willing and ready to help. So our team is truly a community feel to it. So, obviously several of us go to church together, but we're representing 3 or 4 different churches on the team, and just this real community aspect of how can we come together and meet this need that's in the community. I think it's been beautiful to see different volunteers from different churches come together and work towards the same goal. Not that it's been easy, not that we didn't put in work, not that we didn't have tough conversations and work through some stuff, but it has been way easier than I anticipated. It's getting to know the person enough to realize how can we help this person on a holistic level. It's been really nice to see the way that the relationships are formed, that as a client comes in, they're greeted with a nice warm smile, and they're given the advice, they're given a cup of coffee, and just the ability to pray with them and to talk about their situations it's incredible. We've served a handful of clients over the last couple months. The majority of them have been domestic abuse victims, and in really tough home situations where home is not safe for them. They don't know what to do, where to turn, how do I keep my kids, what do I do in these situations where I feel like I have nothing because he's taken everything from me. It's like those cases matter. That is true life change, and that is true community change when you can come alongside that kind of situation. So the kinds of appointments that we are getting are just incredible. That just shows that need is there, and that we're going to do what it takes to be able to get to those people and to get them the services that they need. Life is hard, and so many people are just doing it alone, and they shouldn't have to, and that's what I hope these justice centers can be. I am a mother of 4, ages 7, 6, 4, and 3. I homeschool. I am a college adjunct professor, and my life feels like it is at max capacity all the time. And this works. Somehow this works. It's a once-a-month commitment, and as a justice champion, obviously there's extra things in there that I do, that I commit to. It's not as hard as you think, and you have a whole team of people with you that are sharing that load. If you are wondering if you should do it or if you can do it, just try it.
You can see the grand opening of the Justice Center at Andy's church. She's the one clapping her hands there. Every center that has an opening, we send a red ribbon out so that they are able to have an official grand opening. The woman standing next to her with her thumb up, that's the mayor of their city. And it's not uncommon that people from the community, we've had state senators and police officers and other mayors come because they know how much this is needed. So it's a really beautiful chance to connect your community with your church. Underneath the picture, you'll see the 9 volunteer roles that make up our Justice Center. And you might notice that there's less people in the picture than there are roles. And that's because the average size of our center is 5 volunteers, which means that often a volunteer might be wearing 2 hats. So your interpreter might also be making your follow-up calls, or your hospitality specialist might also serve as your prayer champion. Every center will have at least 1 justice champion. Often there's co-champions, and every center will have at least 1 attorney, ideally 2. The client intake specialist is the very first person that the clients meet with when they come to the center. They're going to check them in, make sure that they have paid the $30 copay that we charge for our services as a way of inviting the clients into the process. So we are doing justice with them and not for them. And then that $30 allows the centers to be self-sustaining. So there's no ongoing cost for the church in hosting the center. After they meet with the client intake specialist, then they will sit down with the attorney, and this is some of what they can expect in that meeting. Our attorneys are not representing people in court. They are listening carefully, asking good questions, and then helping the client understand what their options are under the law, and then deciding with them on what the best path forward is so that every client leaves with their questions answered and a next steps plan, what form they need to fill out or what letter they need to write, what other things they need to do in order to address their legal situation. Often in those client appointments, we have our client advocates join, and they make sure that the client is understanding everything that the lawyer is communicating. Sometimes the attorneys speak a different language. And so just making sure they understand, also exploring what else is going on in their life besides just the legal situation. And then providing referrals if either the church or the community have things that could help with that. So Andy mentioned domestic violence. Are there shelters in the community that you could refer them to? Maybe they have food insecurity and there's pantries that would be useful, or maybe they just lost a loved one and your church has a grief group. And then our client advocates always offer to pray for the clients, and I would say 99% of the time that is warmly received. And often in those times of prayer where just true words are being spoken over them, you can often begin to see the burden lift, and often tears as well. Now, our follow-up advocates, we'll be calling them after usually the following month to check back in with them and see how they're doing on their next step, see if they need to come back for a follow-up appointment. And both our client advocates and our follow-up advocates rely on interpreters if English is not their first language, because we want the clients to feel fully understood and leave with full understanding. So I want to say a word just about our team-centered model. Why don't we just have attorneys at the church? Why do we have all these other people involved? Well, the first reason is just attorneys have a very unique gift. If we have any attorneys on the call, we're so thankful for you. You can do something that no one else can. You can give legal advice. And so we want to protect that. We don't want you also having to do intake and follow-up and outreach because we don't want you to burn out. The second reason is that God has gifted us all in different ways, and so it pleases him when we use those different gifts in order to seek justice for the vulnerable. And then finally, clients are not going to be transformed just by legal help. We know that that comes through the solid soul anchoring hope of the gospel, and God has ordained that that is communicated person to person in relationship. And so we're committed to a team-centered model. So I thought it would be helpful to hear from some of the volunteers serving in a different role so you can get a sense of that.
The need is extremely profound. We can seize the opportunity to give the hope of the gospel and the help of a lawyer. We're literally going into the eye of the storm to help pull people out.
I think places like this where people see that we do care, that we can be there and walk alongside with you, and to have these centers in all these different communities would be a way that community change can happen, one client at a time.
I can hardly think of something that wouldn't be more impactful, not just for the volunteers to experience church outside of the building or the service, but the general public to experience church, to hear the gospel, to see hope.
We want to see things better. We believe in justice. We believe in equality. We believe that everyone deserves to be able to get the help that they need.
Administer Justice has allowed people to become the hands and feet of Christ. When somebody has a team of people, pulling for them and praying for them, it's way more powerful than what any single attorney can provide.
It's given me boldness. I didn't think I had that much to offer, but as I got involved, it just seemed like motivated me. I'm excited and I love it.
I always leave personally encouraged every time I'm here. Even though we may have had some difficult stories that day, it's just that encouragement that, okay, it might feel like just a little step, but it's a step and we're making a difference.
It's blessed me being involved with something that's clearly meeting the need for the community.
Ellos llegan porque tienen una necesidad legal, pero se van con una satisfacción de que se les habla también el mensaje del Evangelio. Se ora por ellos, comparten situaciones, comparten problemas, y eso es muy bonito porque Dios a eso nos ha llamado, a compartir el mensaje del Evangelio.
To give them a little hope and a little guidance and see the impact that that makes for them, that just makes me grow so much as well.
I just want you to know that there's help and there's hope. And if you need it, it's available. And they can come in and see that there's true Christian justice here that can be fair and get me help all the way through.
I think just the importance of being heard, the fact that you're being met with the love of Christ when you walk into the room. I'd like to think that when they walk out of their experience with us, they're like, there might really be a God. Someone heard me.
Loving God and loving others. And how do we do that? We help them live.
I'm praying and I'm working toward a goal that gospel justice centers are as accessible as Walgreens.
I'm prayerful that Administer Justice will be able to expand, and I actually hope they'll do better than they even want. They have a goal, and I hope that God comes in and say, hey, look what I can do. I'm just grateful to be a little tiny part of it.
So now you've heard from some of the volunteers serving in these different roles. We train all the volunteers through our online AJ Academy. So people log in and they're able to complete those modules on their own time. And then we launch cohorts, 3 cohorts a year of Justice Champions who meet once a month on Zoom to get their centers ready for that big grand opening that happens 6 months later. Our prayer champions, you saw writing out those cards. It's usually a prayer specific to the situation. They're also available to pray if someone desires that. And our hospitality specialists try to make it feel as homey as possible, whether that's coffee and baked goods or having toys for kids to play with while mom or dad are sit down with the attorney. And then the really important role is community advocate. And they're the ones who will be going out into the community, letting people know, like the mayor, that there's going to be a center at the church, and also finding out what resources are available so they can provide those referrals as they are needed. So it creates, again, this wonderful bridge between the church and the community. So a huge part of what we do is making an impact in volunteers' lives, but obviously, we're making a big difference in clients' lives as well. These are some of the faces of our clients over the last 26 years. They look like you and me. These are people walking through a hard situation. Maybe it's a job loss or a serious health issue. Maybe it's they've been abandoned, or they're walking through domestic violence and they're trying to figure out, how do I get out of this? Whatever it is, they're stepping into the doors of your church with a heavy load, and it's hard to open up and talk about that. So we work hard to train our volunteers to receive people without judgment, to make them feel at home and at ease. And again, we see from our client surveys that that is the experience of our clients. I'm going to play just a really short video from one of our clients. When we were filming that last video, she was coming in for a follow-up appointment and she wanted to share a word. Stephanie, just so you know, had been living in an apartment for 5 years that had sewage backing up in her bathtub, leaking down onto her dining room. She had documented requests to the landlord for 5 years who had failed to authorize the necessary repairs. She had developed asthma, had reported it to the health department, and just didn't know what her options were. She'd met with the attorney. She'd taken those next steps, and now she was coming back for her follow-up appointment when she shared this.
Talk to them. They make you feel at ease. They listen completely, so that way you know that you have their undivided attention, and just explain and they will help you. I learned things that I didn't know, and unless you're an attorney, you really won't know these things. So it's a good program to offer guidance for whatever issues that you have. And they make it so plain and easy, so they don't use all of the big terminology, all these big words that you don't know what they're talking about. They talk in layman's terms, so that way it's easy to understand. They will let you know that they don't represent you, but they will guide you through. And they will look at whatever paperwork you have or what evidence you have, and they will steer you in the direction that you need to go in, so you won't be blindsided on some things that you didn't know that may come your way. So I think the program is very helpful, and it's very affordable, because everybody cannot afford, an attorney. It costs us way too much. So this program makes it available for those who are short on cash to get the information that they need.
Wonderful. I'm about to wrap it up here. We're at that 30-minute mark, but I just want to leave you thinking, if your church is looking for additional ways that you can make an impact in your community, and you want it to be an opportunity that invites people into your church building, lets them connect with the people in your congregation, this is a really unique and needed opportunity. And we try to make it as simple as possible to get started by providing the malpractice and liability insurance, the systems, the scheduling software, the launch kit, everything you need to get started. And so I would love to talk with you more if that's something you're considering. We got this card a couple years ago. We usually just get the feedback surveys, but I love that it mentioned that they left with hope and strengthened faith and a plan to address their problem, because that is our goal in doing this. So thank you for joining me today. And again, there'll be an email going out with a recording if you want to share it with folks at your church, and also a link to my calendar if you'd like to follow up and ask some questions and explore next steps. But for now, I'll let you go. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.